once you enter the Israeli checkpoint, there's this feeling of defiance that gets over your head. Because suddenly you're from Jordan, you're a normal citizen, and you go into Israel and it's so apparent that you're second grade human. They were like,
They also tried to take part of Jordan,
true, they
I
were just like,
think.
yeah, go and rogue, يعني.
Not just Palestine, also everywhere else. Hi, everyone. Here is Tea with Mint, and we're your hosts, Leen and Sarah. Sarah speaking. So yeah, this podcast in general is here to talk about just whatever we feel like in the moment. And more importantly, it will also talk about whatever is going on in the moment and historical events as they unfold. In this episode is going to be a part of a series that we're going to be calling Tea with Meramia, which is somewhat of a bitter herb here in the Middle East that we drink with our tea. We kind of talked a little bit about it in the first episode if you want to check that out. Yeah, today we're just going to focus, in the series, we're going to focus on the Palestinian experiences, and today, more specifically, on one of our hosts' experiences on Leen's journey into Palestine and how all that unfolded. So yeah, let's get started. Leen, do you have your tea?
I have my coffee. I mentioned that last episode. I don't actually really like tea, but I do like the vibe of tea, and that's why we called the series, tea with mint slash meramie slash whatever you want to drink with tea.
But I also feel like almost every Arab country drinks tea with mint, or like a country in the MENA region, at least. I feel like we drink it, Morocco drink it, like everyone in the Levant region drink it.
True.
I feel like people in North Africa drink it as well, like
Yeah.
Morocco, Algeria, Libya, also Egypt. Like I feel like it's just a really nice drink. That's like I feel like also people in Turkey drink it, right?
Yeah,
With
I think
mint.
it's
I'm
a
not sure.
very Middle Eastern drink, specific to our region. So it's very,
Yeah,
the symbolism behind the title, guys. What do you have, Sarah?
exactly. The
Speaking,
symbolism.
speaking about tea.
I have very westernized. No, I don't think. I think
Not really.
matcha is Japanese, so it's not really. But I'm drinking it iced, so maybe that's the westernized version.
Yeah. So I have my coffee and you have your tea, and let us go on a journey to Palestine together. Except Sarah cannot actually go into Palestine. Let's start with that, I think. And oh, by the way, guys, I'm going to be speaking a lot in this episode. Sarah's going to be intervening whenever she has a question for me. But for now, let me start with explaining why I can go into Palestine. So, in the 1948 and in 1967, many people got out of Palestine because of what was happening. A lot of them were refugees. The case for my families was not that. We were not refugees. We had businesses between my father's family had business between Jordan and Palestine. And so he actually lived in Jordan before Palestine was occupied. And my grandmother's family, my mother's family, she had family outside. They left when the events started happening, but they didn't go into Jordan. They went all over the world. Some people went to Europe, some people went Khaliji areas, and that was my mother's family. She left into Al Khalij.
The Gulf
Yeah,
region.
the Gulf region. She left into the Gulf region, and so that's the story of my family's how they left Palestine. Both of my grandmothers and my grandfather from my mother's side resided in Palestine before all of this, and then my grandmother from my father's side went over to Jordan when she got married to my grandfather, who actually still lived there. So what happened after that? What happened after that is that Palestine was occupied and you cannot enter it, except after the UNHCR created the right of return for refugees. It's a document that people who have families inside Palestine can get to be able to go into Palestine. And that was opened for a very short amount of time, where so many families applied to be in there. My father's family did not apply. So right now, I have a document to go into Palestine. My father does not have a document, so he has never been into Palestine even though his father and mother, they went there, they had family there. But that's mainly because they left out of the 1948 region. My father's family is from Lid, which is Lud right now. But my mother's family are from Nablus, which are areas in the West Bank, which is where the Palestinian authorities. Yes, Sarah.
I feel like a high school. Like I'm back in school. I raised my hand up. So why, if your father chose to apply for a document now, can he? Since he's originally from Palestine, and apparently you can apply for these. So can he do that and get one?
So, yeah, the issue with that is that I think you can still apply. That's something I researched online, that you can still apply for a document and the right of return, but we do not have family in there. So our right of return is to the land, but to be able to get that document, you have to have family inside of Palestine, which we do not currently have. And also, the program itself was halted because there was no cooperation from the occupation. And so there are some people who are still, they have applications that are still not, what is it called, approved. And there are people inside of Palestine who left from areas that are in the 1948 regions, or in areas like Jerusalem and Hebron. That Hebron as in Khalil. I'm just giving you guys the westernized names or the occupational names, except these are not the correct names. We still give them the correct names, which is Al Khalil, Al Quds, Quds for Jerusalem. So there are people inside of Palestine, inside of the West Bank, who are trapped in the West Bank. They can't go back to their families, even though they have families in there, and they applied to get their right of return. But because the program has been halted and so little approvals have been made, I think so many people lost faith in this program. So the people who have the documents, they were lucky. They applied and they got it in that short amount of time, including my family. The people who did not get it are not going to get it. So my father's family, as so many other Jordanian Palestinians, cannot go into Palestine. As for yes.
Another question. So can you, for those who don't know, can you explain what the 1948 areas are, or why they're called that way?
So in the Palestinian occupation, there are two main dates that are always talked about. One is 1948 and the other is 1967. And that's because 1948 is actually Nakba. That's when people were forcibly displaced and told to leave areas, including the areas of the 1948, including Lid, my country, including Haifa, Yafa, Safad, all of these places that are in the northern areas of Palestine. And then so what happened in 1967 is that Israel occupied everything. And in 1948, there was an agreement that they would give Palestinians, I think, 40% of the land. And Palestinians were understandably not happy with that. And so there was, after a couple of years, a war, which is called the 1967 war, where Israel occupied all of Palestine, as well as areas of Egypt, Sana'a, Sina, not Sana'a, the Sina area. And then the Egyptians were able to get them out. But they took basically most of the land by that point. They were like...
They also tried to take part of Jordan.
True. They were just like, yeah, gone wrong. Israel gone wrong.
Then like, not just Palestine, also everywhere else. Also, I just want to add here, to put things into perspective, they were giving 40% of the land to 80% of the population, more than 80% of the population. So just imagine how like not fair that was.
Yeah,
Um,
Basically, the way that the people were gotten out of these countries, their places, their cities, is by mass genocide. So never think for a moment that the genocide happening in Gaza is the first ever occurrence of that. No, this is happening over the years, quickly, then slowly, then quickly again, then slowly. My grandmother from my mother's side left because she was scared that there were rape cases and genocide cases when she left. She left and she went into, I think, Egypt because her brothers were there. And so many families left because of threats, because they would hear stories about some of the cities and the small villages that were occupied and how they were occupied. And this is actually a scare tactic by the occupation, where they would invade some of the villages and send some of the survivors from these villages into other places where they would tell the story and basically scare all the others away. So my family, I was born in Jordan, Amman, and my mother was married to my father, and she, you know, gave me the document that would enable me to go into Palestine or the West Bank territory. And this is also interesting to note that everybody all over the world can actually now go into Palestine or the occupied territories if they admit and they get the stamp of approval from Israel. But when this entire struggle started, our religious leaders and our communities created this unspoken rule where people were strongly advised not to go into Palestine unless they have this right of return, which basically says, I am Palestinian and I'm returning to my land, and not I am going into Israel. So even though Sarah can now go into, and Sarah and other people, and other Jordanians, other Arab people can go into Palestine, you can notice that there isn't much touristy videos of people going into Palestine unless they're Palestinians. There isn't any amount of tourism inside of Palestine. And that's just because morally and ethically, the Arab region has created this unspoken rule where unless you have this document, you cannot go. So, and Jordan is the only country that has that document, by the way. No other country has it. Yes, Sarah.
Just want to add, morally and ethically, we don't go because that would mean that we have to admit that Israel or the occupational forces have the right to be there, and we'll get our passport stamped with their stamp, meaning that we're entering their land, which is not true.
Yeah. And
So,
also,
because we don't want to admit that, because we don't want to have that in our record, because also there are so many places in the world that do right now, because of this ongoing genocide and occupation that they're enforcing on the land and on the people there, there is kind of certain countries that do not necessarily accept your passport anymore, even if you have the Israeli stamp on it.
yeah,
So that last part is not even part of the argument. It's not the moral part. It's just an added value. And honestly, I have so much respect for these countries. If you have that stamp, don't even like, I don't think they completely not allow you to enter the country, but you go through, I think, more trouble than it's worth at that point, and you're just like, why should I? But also, again, the moral value of the whole thing, it just does not make sense.
that's why I was like, how is it unspoken? Like there has to be something enforcing it. But right now, most of the Arab countries don't have that rule anymore. But still, we're
Yes.
kind of holding on, or the people still don't go into Palestine. I think a lot of people don't understand why they don't go. And they're like, why can't we go? Like now I can go to Jerusalem, and like, because we have a lot of value in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. But many people don't understand why they didn't go, or why they don't go, even though these rules were like 20 years ago. It's not a far amount of time that these rules were implemented. Maybe even 10 years ago that they were still implemented. So time changes, and there's a lot of يعني bad education about it.
Okay, I don't want to interject again because I don't want to take this away from Lean's story, but there are certain Jordanian people or certain people in Jordan who are going into Palestine, and then because I think they also have special documentation, and because, for example, in the moment, or at least in front of the world, Jordan has um, basically the duty to guard Al-Aqsa Mosque or like religious, not just Al-Aqsa Mosque, but religious artifacts in Jerusalem. And so people who are working in that sector and who are working with the in that part of the Jordanian government are allowed to go into Jerusalem without getting um their passport stamp. As far as I know, I would have to double check that. Um, but yeah, because they would be like ambassadors of the Jordanian government who has the right to be there to protect those religious sites. I think I know this just because also my mother has a relative who works in the whole guarding Al-Aqsa Mosque
Mm.
thing. Or like he works there in that part of the government. But then again, that also comes with its own like dilemma but yeah, that also exists continually.
Okay, so let's talk about the documents. There are two types of passports in Jordan, and there are actually maybe three, and there are two types of Palestinian right of return documents. There's the green card and there's the yellow card. And people who have the green card have a temporary Jordanian passport, whereas people who have the yellow card have a permanent Jordanian passport with a national ID number, which means that people who have the green card for Palestinian authorities, they're people who are residents of the West Bank. Whereas people who have the yellow card, like me, I'm a resident of Jordan. I don't have any houses inside the West Bank. And I have a national identification. I can own property in Jordan. I'm basically a citizen of Jordan. Whereas the Jordanian people who have the permanent Jordanian passport have the yellow card, which means they're residents of Jordan, but they can still go into the West Bank. And I think they changed the rules, so the laws for that. So even people who have temporary passports right now can still own property in Jordan. But generally speaking, people who are from Jordan, people who have the permanent passport, they get access to education, free healthcare in Jordan, and they also pay to the universities with the internal rates. So people who are from Palestine who come to study in Jordan, they pay in dollars. They pay the rates for international students, exactly. So that's the main difference.
Which is
way higher.
Which is, just for context, probably like 5 times higher than normal,
exactly.
right?
Yeah. So in reality, they're not citizens. They just get the passport because they have to pass by the Jordanian borders. Yeah, I think that's Jordanian Palestinians, we got the best end of the deal, if we can even call it that. All the other countries bordering Palestine got wathiqa, or what's called a permit. There are different levels to the wathiqa. You get a better permit and a lower end permit. People who have the Egyptian border permit, mostly people who live in Gaza, they have the worst deal. They can't travel anywhere basically, and they don't have a passport. These people don't have any documents. Now, for me, going into the reason why I go into the West Bank, if I'm a resident of Jordan, sorry, the reason I go into the West Bank is because I need to go there to be able to create documents for my passport, for my Jordanian passport. As I mentioned before, I don't have much family in Palestine. I have family from my mother's side, but we don't have any immediate family. I don't have grandparents or uncles or aunts that I feel very comfortable to stay with if I would go into Palestine. Of course, I can stay in a hotel, but that's just not the culture there. And I'll speak about that later when I go into it. But yeah, I went to Palestine 4 times, I think, or five maybe. Sometimes when I was a baby, I remember because my mom told me that I met her grandfather when I was a baby in her hands carried, and the other 3 times that I remember were once to be entered into the right of the return permit because they put me on the document, and the other time was to be separated when you're 17. You get separated from your parent, the parent who has that document, and that was my mother for me. So I have to go in there and do the documents and then be separated into my own document. And then that would enable me to get my identification or my ID for my passport. So that's when I get my ID as a 17-year-old, I guess. I'm not sure about the numbers. I think it might be 15 or 17, but it's basically when you're an adult, you get separated from your parents. And that's when I went. And I think there was one time in the middle where we just went for the heck of it. Or because, my brothers are younger than me, so I would get separated at a certain age. They would have to get separated later on. So we have to go there every single time. So yeah, that's why I go most of the time. We have friends who go there every single year because they live there and they have to go there. And now let me speak about the journey itself.
Before you go there, can I ask a question? Does the document have an expiry date, or do you have to renew it every, I don't know, like 2, 3, 5 years? I don't know. Do you have to go back and renew it? And does it have an expiry date, or is it just like you have it forever?
So the main dates that I spoke about are the main dates you have to go there. And for example, my mother has to go and separate me from her in order to get her Jordanian documents. But after that, let's say my mother is done with separating all of us from it, she doesn't have to go in there anymore if she doesn't want to. And we have friends in Jordan who live in Jordan who didn't actually even renew it because the past couple of years were really hard with COVID and everything, and there were specific dates for opening the checkpoints and days and hours that were so less, and that people would be so crowded there. So if there was no reason for you to go, even if you need to go do the documents, you wouldn't go, and it would work out for some people. Some other people would have struggled with their documents later on. But yeah, from what I know, there are only two main dates. It's when you first have to be in the document, and then when you get separated into your own document. Yeah, these are the main dates. So let's talk about the checkpoints. So a typical actual journey from Amman into the West Bank would take 2 hours 30 minutes, guys. 2 hours 30 minutes. This is your, like you're going on a fun trip with your family. You can go from Jordan, from Amman into Palestine, the West Bank, in 2 hours 30 minutes. But because of all the checkpoints that I'm going to be mentioning, the journey typically takes half a day. And if you go in the morning, if you go really early in the morning, it might take you a bit less. And if you go in the evening, it might take you a bit more. And if you go late at night, you might be waiting till the next day. This is how it is. It's not an airport situation where they operate 24 hours a day. There are certain opening hours and certain closing hours. And then, if if Israel wants to, have a break, they don't want to work today, they can just be like, hey, our checkpoint is closed for the day, we're not going to work. And you just have to wait. And I'm saying this because whereas I'm privileged, alhamdulillah, to have my own house in Jordan, some people make the journey from the countries they're traveling from. So I live outside of Jordan right now. And if I don't have any house in Jordan, I would have to travel from Jordan, from my country, the place where I am, to Jordan, and from Jordan to the borders with Palestine, and then go into Palestine. So imagine how long that would take. And depending on where you are in the world, this journey is very expensive and very long, because also you're paying for the ticket into Jordan. because you can't go directly into Palestine from the airport. And then you're paying on all of these three checkpoints, you have to pay a certain fee. So let's start the journey there. You go using a car into the bordering area, the first checkpoint with Jordan. You pass by that. It doesn't take long to pass by the Jordanian checkpoint, I think half an hour. And then you go into the Israeli checkpoint and then onto the Palestinian Authorities checkpoint. So we are at the first checkpoint. We're at the Jordanian checkpoint, and this is, as I said, is the easiest part of the journey. It's half an hour. You just give your documents, you take your documents, you leave. Let me mention that you have to go by buses. There are certain buses. There are certain authorized cabs as well that can take you through it, but you pay an extra fee. This is like the VIP treatment of treatments. Where you go into a car or like a VIP kind of a situation, which I went to once. I went through that situation. But other times you get into a bus with all the other people who are also traveling, and you pass by the first border, no issue. You get to the second border, maybe there it's fine and everything goes by quickly. You go in there, you give your documents, they search you or they search your stuff, and it's organized in general. I think the Israeli checkpoint is organized, but it operates only when they want you to operate. It's by their own mind. That's what controls us. Their mood is what controls us. And then I think it's worth mentioning that you might be thinking to yourself, like, why put yourself through all of that trouble if you can just travel directly to Palestine? But I need to mention that there are no airports in Palestine. There were plans of creating an airport that goes directly and is operated by Palestinians, but is not Palestinian. So it's still Israeli, but it's in the Palestinian territories. And that would have made it very easy to go into the West Bank. And I think a lot of people would have actually gone through that airport, because even though you would have to admit that you're entering into or through Israel, it's still better than paying so much money and having so much time to go into the place that you want to go to. Like, imagine paying 3 different countries to enter their land, and paying the airport to go into it, and paying the fees of the cab to go into the borders, and then paying the bus fees. It's such an expensive trip, other than all of the other problems that we're going to speak about. So you go into the Israeli checkpoint, and generally, as I said, the process is smooth. They smile at you even. Sometimes they smile at you, and it's very annoying when they smile at you. Like, why are you smiling? I remember the first time I went there. I remember the first time I was very young, but the second time where I was going to be separated from my mother, I was actually late. So late in going to the border. There's a specific amount of time. I think when 17 and a half, you go there, and if you're late, then you're late or something like that. I remember I was put separately. I had to take the bag that I was carrying when I reached the Israeli checkpoint. And they told me to put my bag on a table, I remember, and there were 2 soldiers. One was a girl or like a female, and the other was a guy. And I think they were a bit older than me. I don't think they were that old. But of course, they were in full military attire with the cap even. And they just told me, put your bag in there. And they let me turn from a certain place. And I think, once you enter the Israeli checkpoint, there's this feeling of defiance that gets over your head. Because suddenly, you're from Jordan, you're a normal citizen, and you go into Israel, and it's so apparent. It's so apparent that you're second grade human. Not even citizen. You're not even a second grade citizen. You're a second grade human. So you feel this amount of defiance that you're not going to take my worth away from me. So I remember being very, like, yeah, take my bag. I don't care. You want me to turn around this table? I don't care. You want me to pass by the checkpoint area, and there's these like wood metal doors that turn when you walk through them. I was so like, يعني, I didn't care. I didn't have a care in the world. My mom, she was dying. My mom was scared as hell. Because, and I didn't notice this, if I noticed this, maybe I would have been a bit more scared. But apparently, on each checkpoint, and I didn't notice that that even in this checkpoint there are these things. I think a lot of people, maybe they remember the Qalandia checkpoint, which I think is in the Jerusalem area, where so many people die there because there are snipers above your head at the checkpoint area, the place where you turn around the metal door. There are snipers that are literally pointing on each person's head that passes by the checkpoint. And there was a sniper there. There was a sniper, and it's not a small, يعني, I don't know how to describe it because I don't have that vocabulary, but it's not a small gun. It's not a person with a gun sitting on top of you. It's like a literal gun thing, like a gun machine that's like bigger than my entire body. And there's like this one thing pointing at you. So my mom was like scared. You guys were not used to these trips. I don't live in an area that's heavily militarized. People who live in the West Bank, this is not something that they're not used to. But for me, coming outside of that, it's very unusual. Because occupation is unusual, so that makes sense. But yeah, so you pass by that checkpoint, you're already a second grade citizen by that point, or a human, as I mentioned, and you go into the Palestinian Authority checkpoint. Now, the issue with the Palestinian Authority checkpoint is that there is no organization. You guys are overcrowded into this little space, and everybody is over each other. I remember once going and I think leaving even from that checkpoint, and we were in a big crowd. And you guys, like in our culture, I'm not supposed to be touching or crowding with guys. I'm not supposed to be, and it feels very uncomfortable for me to be crowding or like being pushed against a guy. Like, I think that's uncomfortable. Let's just agree that's uncomfortable for everybody. But
Yeah.
this is what we had to go through. And there is, it's funny how before you enter these places, there are people coming from the US, there are people coming from other Arab countries that they've been living in, or in Jordan, and we're used to control, we're used to tidiness. But as soon as you enter to this area, it's like you get into the survival mindset. Everybody just wants to leave. Everybody just wants to get out of there, and so everybody starts pushing against everybody because there is no organization. And I remember we were young. My mom was the only person with us. There was no man with her. My father obviously cannot even go in there, and so she was just like trying to find any other guy who would help us, just pass through this checkpoint. Like, we had our bags with us, we're carrying everything, we don't need help in that department, just let us pass. Because of the fact that there's no organizational skills or any sort of organization, everybody just becomes an advocate for themselves, and it makes for very ugly human interactions. And I don't blame anybody in that situation because we're all put against each other in that pit, basically. Yeah. So,
Can I ask a question here?
sure.
You said you got this feeling, or like you can already see or feel that you were, as soon as you entered the Israeli checkpoint, that you were like being treated as a second grade human. Was there something specific that they said or did, or like just the way they spoke? Can you like give more details about
Yeah.
that and what made you feel like that?
I think it's just the general feeling of degradation, You're a person with specific rights and specific usual human interaction. You go into a passport, you give the people your passport, they stamp it, they tell you have a nice flight. In there, no, it's like I remember even once in the bus, people were hiding, or they were like, "Why did you get this perfume with you?" And the perfume looked like circular with something on top of it, and they were scared that Israeli authorities would think that it was a bomb. And it's these random things that you have to think about more often. People smuggle random, like this is very funny, but people smuggle cigarettes into Palestine because they're very expensive in Palestine. So people bring gifts of cigarettes and they hide them. And it's like this stupid thing of thinking about all of these things in the first place. Like, why do I have to think about how these things look? And it's because you become kind of like scared, you know, like your biggest, the most important thing in your life right now is passing through this border and them not thinking that you're coming there to kill them because you want to go there. And the fact that we have to censor our even the smallest things that we carry with us, you know. If you carry the scissors that you use to cut your sewing things with, maybe they're gonna think this is something to kill them with, you know. Like, it's this thinking, this way of degrading our existence to like, even us, we're just like, yeah, they're gonna be scared of this, they're gonna think we're terrorists because of this. Do you have your documents with you? Do you have everything that will enable you to pass this test that they're putting on you? As well as obviously like the security checks, the way they let us go and pass by this metal door one by one and telling us, why are you here? Where are you coming from? As much as you guys tell us about peace and you guys should be peaceful with them. Yeah, let them point a sniper at your head when you're entering their country and then tell me about peace, please. You know?
I mean, your country.
Yeah, my country, but like, you know, when they say, let us live under the, we will be the rulers, like the rule will be Israeli, but you guys will be citizens. Yeah, sure. I can see your respect from here. So yeah.
Through the machine gun.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm telling you, like, this is the first thing you see when you enter the Israeli checkpoint. And then you go into the Palestinian checkpoint. Let's not comment on that, but why is there أصلا a Palestinian checkpoint after the Israeli checkpoint? If we're entering the West Bank, guys, let's do the little logic here. The West Bank is ruled by the Palestinian authorities, right? Okay,
So they say.
Yeah, they say that. So logically speaking, if the West Bank is stuck to the Jordanian border, whose checkpoint should be coming after the Jordanian checkpoint? Yeah, you would think
Palestinian.
You would think the Palestinian, right?
Also, there shouldn't be an Israeli checkpoint. There should be an Israeli checkpoint if there is.
Yeah, good thinking.
Between the West Bank and Israel, not between Jordan and the West Bank.
Wallahi, you know, I didn't say anything. I'm just letting you guys think about it. Let's think about it by the logic. Moving on, let's not talk about that, we'll move on. You go into the West Bank, you reached the place and you're gonna take a taxi. Okay? You pass by the most beautiful mountains. Nablus is located between 3 mountains. Okay? And the mountains you pass by, actually no, I think this is inaccurate because when you go out of Nablus you see these mountains. But let's ignore all of that. You're driving, okay? And you're driving and there's nature and it's so pretty and everything. You see a huge concentration of brick buildings, and so many buildings just like squashed in together. This is Nablus. You're there. You arrived to the place that you're there. And now why am I mentioning that? When you go from Nablus to Ramallah is the Palestinian Authority headquarters. They're there. You know, this is the, what is it called? The
capital?
Yeah, this is the capital of the Palestinian territories. The Palestinian Authority is there. You pass by these beautiful mountains and it's greenery, and you see these little houses between that greenery, and you can just see how spacious it is, you know? And then you start seeing so many buildings. There's no greenery, there's nothing. It's just buildings, you know, people living there. And that's where this is the the Palestinian regions. This is how you know you're in Palestine. You're in the Palestinian territories. Tell me. What do I see when I start arriving to Nablus? As I mentioned, you see a lot of buildings, you see a lot of concentration of population. And that's because we don't have a lot of areas that we can build in. I think we can discuss this later, but there are different areas of Palestine named A, B, C, like there are different regions in there. Ones where you can build, ones where you cannot build, and you can live there as a Palestinian, by the way, and ones where there is a Palestinian Authority, ones where there is no Palestinian authorities, but Palestinians live there. It's very complicated the way they're dividing stuff up, and it's made that way specifically so that it encourages more settler colonialism in the Palestinian areas. And that's why when you open a Palestinian map and how it changed, you can see little areas of like green, the Palestinian regions, and that's because these are the Palestinian regions that are still there, and they're still being eaten away by settler colonialism in Palestine. So now, staying in Palestine, where do we stay? I think that I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode, but we usually do not stay in hotels. There are hotels in Nablus, but because of the society structure there, nobody would allow you to stay in a hotel. How do you stay in a hotel when you have some sort of family in Palestine? My mom has an uncle in Palestine, and she has, and this is where we're staying, by the way, she has her uncle's, her uncle, his son, his wife is the one who invites us into her house every time we go there. So it's not even
her cousin.
Yeah, her
So your mom's
cousin.
cousin's house.
Yeah, my mom's cousin, but his wife is the person who invites us over. Like she wants us over. I think it's very confusing when the cousin would invite you over. So his wife is
That makes sense because
yeah, because cousins
like the societal structures, like you
yeah,
can't, like the man can't invite the woman into his house.
exactly.
Like that's just gonna be understood wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the weird part about our staying there is that my mom is not related. The relation is very far, you know? That's what I'm saying. The cousin is kind of far away from you. So the logical solution would be to stay with the uncle. But his wife, the cousin's wife, really likes us a lot, and every time she would prepare her house for us and invite us in. And you guys, the people who live in Nablus, they're not rich, mostly speaking, they're not rich. The person who invites us every time is not rich. But يعني she buys us new sheets because we have a severe cat allergy, and she has cats, so she would wash the entire house and she would prepare everything for us. And like she's like, they're the most generous people ever. You go there and you know, like people, some people might give you some snacks. These people get us like a big bowl of fruit, and like every time you go, someone is inviting you to like a big meal, because you know, even us going there, it's not a very usual situation, because as I told you, we go there for documents. So them seeing their relatives, like seeing us or seeing my mother or seeing my siblings, is a very rare occurrence. It's kind of like we're meeting for the first time. I met my mom's cousins, daughters and sons, maybe 3 times in my life, and I remember there was once where we stayed for maybe 2 weeks, and it was like, I think some of my most treasured memories, because also at that point my grandfather's house was still there, so we stayed in the grandfather's house, and we would play with the kids, and we would invite people over. And there was this one room in the house which was below a staircase, so the room was like a triangle, the ceiling. I just remember these facts. Yeah,
Like Harry Potter.
yeah, it was so cool. I remember that house. Like, you know, when you're a child and you go into any house, you feel like it's the biggest thing ever. That was my memory of that house, and it was just amazing. And like
What happened to the house?
my grandfather sold it, even though his sister lives in the house right next to it. So I remember one of the things is that suddenly, like our door, I think, was open, and suddenly we would just find a pastry from my mom's aunt, which I still remember to this day. It was the best thing ever. My mom tried to do it multiple times, but I just remember it was so good. It's like a big za'atar and cheese pastry, مطبق, but it didn't taste like the مطبق that my mom made. So yeah, like going into Palestine, like you're just shocked with the amount of generosity people had. When I was young, I didn't even know these people were poor. It never crossed my mind. But when that second time I visited, I brought my camera with me because I wanted to take videos of Palestine. Maybe I have some footage that I can share on our Instagram account. But people were just like, "Oh my God, you have a camera!" and I just felt such a separation because I remember Heelys were a big thing at that point, and like I had Heelys, and people were just, like, "Oh my God,
What are Heelys?
Heelys!" The skates, the skate. No, you don't know them. The skates with the one wheel
No.
behind. Anyway,
Oh,
yeah,
okay, okay,
Heelys.
okay. Yeah, I
Yeah,
think my siblings had some.
yeah. I loved Heelys.
Was never my thing.
They were so cool. I want Heelys right now, but I'm scared if I like wear one, I might just break my leg or something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
don't wear
so
one.
yeah, but the reality is I felt such a huge separation. And I remember one of the people who were living there asked me, like, if you had the choice between living in, let's say, the Gulf or or Jordan or Palestine, where would you choose to live? And I said Palestine. And they were like, what? Like, you live in a much better area of the world than Palestine. Why would you choose to live in Palestine? And I think I thought that they lacked nationalism, or like they didn't love their country enough. But I think I was naive as well to think that living in Palestine would be such an easy task. Even if, by the way, people in the Palestinian territories, even if they don't have a lot of interaction with the military, they are occupied. They have no work. They have nowhere to work in. Most of the people in the West Bank live in work in Israel. They have the cost of living is very high. The amount of the wages they have are very low. If they even have a job, they can't even permits for building. This is another issue that they face. There are no permits for building. You can't build without a permit, and the permits are very hard to get by because, of course, Israel does not want Palestinian expansion at all. Even if the expansion is in their own building, even if they want to build above their building, having a permit is very hard. So in my time that I went to Palestine, I visited Nablus, of course, and I visited the old city in Nablus. And by the way, my mom's wife's cousin, the one who hosted us in her house, she's an architect. So whenever we would go on tours with her, she would explain the history of the buildings, and she would take us to all the old places. I went to the place where they create the Nablus soap, and the place where they create the best or like the knafe. Knafe, by the way, guys, is native and is Nabulsi. Knafe is Nabulsi. Now there are other types of knafe that are not
I
Nabulsi.
wanted to ask you something.
Tell me.
That's what I was gonna ask. Because the other day a friend told me that the knafe we have in Jordan is not the original Nablusi one. It's not like that.
So yeah, so knafe, the real knafe,
This is a shock to me. I
no,
thought it was like people from Nablus brought it here and it's the same.
no, listen, it is the theory or the concept of knafe is the same, but in Nablus they don't use mozzarella or stretched cheese in their knafe. Generally
Just
speaking,
Nablusi cheese.
exactly, they use Nablusi cheese and it doesn't stretch. Nablusi cheese does not stretch.
Yeah, the salty one.
So yeah, if you go into وسط البلد in Amman, if you go into the old city, that's I think the most close to Nabulsi knafe. But I think what they're saying is that the taste is different and the quality is different, and that's
He
understandable.
said also something about like the dough that they put on top of the cheese. Like it's colored different and the texture is a bit different.
Yeah, because I think in Jordan they put a lot some dye on it to make it look more orange, whereas in Palestine they just don't put the dye. But I don't think, for me, speaking about my hada, and by the way, I'm not a very sweet person eater. I don't like sweet a lot, so maybe. But I did notice a difference in the taste. I don't know what the difference is, but when you heat knafe, It tastes
Mm.
stale, or like not stale, but like a bit hard to chew on when it's. But in Nablus,
Yeah.
they used to reheat them, and they used to actually, what they would do is they would bring so many different knafe, leftover knafe. They would put it in the same صينية or the same container, and then they would put it above the heat, and they would heat it, and you would not even know it was parts of knafe. You know, it's just like it tastes so good. But I think that what they're saying is that the quality is a bit different. I don't think, no, it's different. Now, interesting fact, by the way, about whenever I go into Palestine, and I think this speaks about the conditions the Palestinians are put in. Whenever I go into Palestine, I remember the first time when we were kids, we all got sick because of the water. We all got sick. I don't know if we drank from the water. I don't know if it was from the water or from the food, but we got very, very sick. And the second time we went there, I got an eye infection that was so, like my eyes looked like literal, it was so big. um, we got really sick, and I think that's because of the conditions Palestinians are put through. Nablus is not, or Palestine in general should not have water shortages. We have a river, we have water, groundwater in the city, but Israel deprives these people and deprives even يعني in some part Jordan is affected by that. Water sources are controlled by Israel, and they only give it to people once a week or for a few hours every week. And so it affects health and hygiene conditions of the population. And it really affects us people who come from the outside, because we're just exposed to it when we're not used to it. So yeah, I think let me speak a bit about other places I visited, and I'm gonna mainly speak about Jerusalem. Of course, I think people know how important Jerusalem is for Palestinians, but also as a religious, or not even a religious part, it's just important part. It's the heart of Palestine, I think. And going into Jerusalem is not actually obtainable even for the people who live in the West Bank. But I was lucky enough to visit there 3 times. I remember 2 of these times. My mom told me the third time was when I was a baby, so I don't remember that. But she visited Jerusalem when I was a baby. And basically, to be able to go into Jerusalem, to be able to go into Al-Aqsa, you have to get a permit. And that permit is given by, let's say you ask for a permit from one of the hospitals inside of Jerusalem to have an excuse to be able to go in there. And it's very hard to get granted a permit unless you know someone. And it's very hard to be sure that you're going to get it by the time that you want to visit. So I remember one of the times we got a permit, and the people who were in the West Bank with us did not get the permit. So we had to go without them. Even like the host I told you about, she didn't get the permit, and we got it. So we traveled without her in there. There was one time that we went there without a permit, and that is very unsafe for women, but specifically it's very unsafe if you're a guy and you're above 17 years old, because خلاص, now you are in the terrorist category. You are no longer a boy, you are now a terrorist. This is how I think the Western, and of course يعني, the Israeli view of Palestinians are. And I think even if you're a woman, you might be a terrorist, but you know, like you're less of
Even if you're a child, you might be a terrorist. I
yeah, of
mean,
course.
the scenes we're seeing right now, like I think I saw a 2-year-old having a gun pointed at him. Like he was a little child who was
Yeah,
2 years old in the West Bank and had an Israeli soldier pointing like a meter
arresting
long
them.
gun, half a meter long gun at this like little boy who was just like standing and not understanding what the hell is happening.
Exactly.
And so apparently 2-year-olds are now also terrorists.
Exactly. It's I think they amended the law to be able to arrest people younger than 14 years old uh, into prison. And it's crazy, but it makes it even scarier for us to go. I remember my uncle was with us. He was 17 at that point, and we were very scared for him. basically you go in a roundabout way to Jerusalem, and then you take the buses from the buses that are Jerusalem buses, and you go into the old city of Jerusalem where Al-Aqsa Mosque is. And this is just for us to be able to go in there, to just pray a couple of prayers, maybe pray Dhuhr prayer and then leave. And yeah, I think I'm really thankful my mom strived for us to go in there, because there is like everybody who I think lives in Al-Aqsa, specifically in Jerusalem, they say they have this feeling or they have this unexplainable connection to their land, and I think I felt it too. And it's crazy how like it's occupied, but you still feel a certain peace once you enter the place of Al-Aqsa Mosque. And we went into all of the mosques in there, Qubbat al-Sakhra, which is the Dome of the Rock. We entered under the rock, which by the way, the rock is not floating. I thought it was floating, guys. I thought the Dome of the Rock. So backstory. Dome of the Rock is named after the rock that Prophet ﷺ stood above, and the rock just leveled up a bit. And I thought the rock was floating. I thought it was magic or something, or like magical sense. It turns out the rock it made a certain dome. So I went under that dome, and I think I have a video of that which I can also share. And it's a very beautiful place, and with all the different things that are being made so that people cannot fix places in the mosque. They can't basically they cannot do anything if let's say parts of the Dome of the Rock are ruined. They cannot fix it. They cannot do any sort of maintenance for the mosque's part. It's still beautiful, and you just get this amazing feeling about it. I think that's it for me. Going back into Amman or Jordan after I'm done is also a very long time or area, and you have to kind of be smart about it. You need to leave in the middle of the week so that you are not overcrowded with people. The place is not overcrowded with people, and you ask the people that work around the checkpoints when you should go, when you should come back. The time where my eyes were infected, they made us wait for no reason. They made us wait to pass by the checkpoint, and at that point you start trying to find someone who works inside the checkpoints that may be able to help you to go out of the bus. And I remember like at that point, some people were sick, some people had hygienic women issues. And it's just very degrading. They basically they had their periods, guys, and it's very degrading to not be able to
just say that.
Yeah, not be able to
women hygienic issue.
Hygienic issue. Women.
I was like, why are you doing that?
No, because it's very, you can't go into the toilet. Let's not even talk about women issues. You want to go to the toilet. You want to access the toilet. You can't. You're stuck in that bus. You're stuck in the bus with maybe 20, 30 other people who are also stuck with you, and everybody's angry. Everybody wants to leave. And, you make it back, and I make it back, and alhamdulillah, I take a shower. I get ready for bed in my house in Jordan. But imagine the people who have to make it back by a certain amount of time to be able to reach the airport, to be able to go back to the place they're residing in right now. And I'll end it there.
Like, imagine that's like the US, which is like, I don't know, like 14-hour flight. Australia, I don't know how many hour flight from Jordan. It's like, okay, that's
crazy. It's crazy. عن جد, you see other people's issues and yours becomes a bit lighter on you. Seeing other people's struggles really makes it, you feel like you're blessed. Alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to have a house inside of Jordan and be able to rest and take my time to go in and like not facing the same stress of like, oh my God, I have to be finished with this border and then drive again to the airport. And yeah, alhamdulillah. I think I want to just note that this my experience is very limited. I don't live in the West Bank, and I only go there a specific amounts of times in the years that I've lived. And we really want to maybe host people who have gone through bigger experiences or have more experience living in there. There are so many things I didn't mention, and maybe I'll mention يعني, or in passing, that I also visited an olive orchard, and it still inspires me in writing to this day. Um, and yeah, just thinking how beautiful Palestine was even before, when they proclaimed it as a land that was empty when it wasn't. But yeah, I think we will also host other people who have gone through bigger experiences in the future. This is just about my experience. If
Yeah, I think it just like again, it's really nice to hear this because again, I feel like you haven't talked in this much detail about like so many things and like the whole even going to Al-Aqsa, I don't think I've ever like this is the first time that I'm realizing you went there. Like to me, like when you go, you're just going to Nablus and coming back, or like you're just like I just picture you in line for like some documentation.
yeah,
Like we would hear in Jordan, oh, what are you here for? And you're just like you tell them what you're here for and they renew it for you. Or like they give you the paper and you're just like on your way. But it's not like that. It's just insane how like very basic things. Like I think, for example, like for me, Jordan has come a long way in like these documentation and like these processes and like now you can get your passport in use in Jordan within 2 hours, which is crazy to me. Which
yeah,
like, oh my God, efficiency. Thank you. But even back in the day when it was like taking a week or two, but like that isn't even the case there. It's like just insane how many basic normal things that we take for granted are just not basic or normal.
just to note, like the fact that we have to go through these processes is in our favor, in its principle, the fact that we have a right of return. That's why
Yeah, of
the
course.
Jordanian authorities, that's why the Jordanian authority process for passports for Palestinians is longer, because they have to account for us, the fact that we have a right of return in the and in the future, inshallah, يعني, we continue to have our right of return. But in reality, it also makes for a very challenging experience whenever we have to do our documents. There are certain documents that you literally, as I mentioned, you have to travel to the West Bank to get them. And for people who have no family and they just go for يعني, or they have this distant family like us, and they don't have their husbands with them. يعني my mom, she struggled. My brothers, when they're twins, when they were 2 years old, we had to go into the West Bank. Just imagine that journey for my mom. I was maybe, let's say, 8 years old, and my sister was 4. يعني challenging experience, but that we have to go through. It's like, if you forget you're Palestinian, here's your reminder. And it's not a positive reminder. So yeah, I think this is it for my experience, but there are so many different experiences that we will speak about, including Palestinians in Jordan, Palestinians in around Palestine, the people who left from Syria, from Lebanon, from Egypt, and maybe going on in detail about their situation, from our understanding, if we don't find someone to talk about it,
Yeah.
as well as like different experiences of living outside of Palestine and how that is sometimes a challenge. Like I think also,
So our next episode will probably be about the dehumanization and the uh, terrorism and what it means to what it could mean to the West, or like what the West portrayed as, and how we in the Middle East view it. And it also like takes kind of from this episode how when we talked about
how
how it's not safe for certain groups of people to be in certain places, and how you're immediately, if you're born a guy or a man, somehow
yeah,
reverse sexism. you're
Yeah,
like just labeled as a terrorist without even a second thought. It's not even innocent until proven guilty. It's like guilt terrorist until proven otherwise, but it's never proven otherwise. So you're just that.
yeah,
But we're gonna just delve deeper into that, and just what we view terrorism as. And
yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be like we're bordering on some heavier topics now, but I think it's very much warranted and it's very much needed at this point.
I think with that we will end our episode. I hope you enjoyed your tea with mint with us, or Meramia in this case.
Meramia.
Yeah, your tea with Meramia, guys. Did you enjoy it? And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode next week, inshallah.